everybody. Welcome to our second installment of the Artful Leaders interview series here in the winter of 2021. I am super excited to be here today with my new friend and business partner, Jen Verhoeven. And one of the things I want to do with this interview series is really highlight leaders who are taking on the current challenge of the pandemic in the field of education with creativity, with courage, and really giving back to the field in powerful ways. And that's why I wanted to bring Yen on today, because she is a powerhouse. She's so passionate. And when we met at a women's business conference virtually, I heard her talking about this desire to blow up the field of education and be a rebel. And I was like, I need to talk to her. And we jumped in and got to know each other, and we're doing some fun collaborations together. And so I just wanted to take a little bit more time to introduce you all to Yen. So I'm so happy to have you here today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about you and what you're up to, who you are, what you're doing?
Sure, I can totally do that, Rochelle. And thank you so much for having me on board. I've been looking forward to this event and, meeting with all of you. I am Jen Verhoeven. Our company is Key Learning Research Group, and we are about changing the world by changing the way we do education. That's our mission. That's our nutshell. I'm a learning theorist. I've had over 21 years of experience teaching like little kids all the way to senior citizens, the whole gamut on how we can empower our students with education. So like I said, I approach things through a learning theory lens. My PhD is in curriculum and instruction, but I'm also a certified online instructional designer and program evaluator. So a lot of times in the work that we do, it's about, not only approaching things through passion, but how is it going to impact the people that we're reaching? Like, what is the impact? How do they experience things? How do they view it? Are the things that we're designing ideal for our learners, right? In all of the environments that we've been encountering. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. And one of the things that I appreciate about you is that because I'm such a like artsy, fartsy, passionate person.
Which
And
is great.
which is great. But you're so great at like harnessing those things and putting it together in a plan and in a curriculum and a whole system that's really going to produce those outcomes that we want. And so I'd love for you to talk a little bit about um, kind of the role that you're playing right now in helping educators shift and pivot in this new online world of education.
Sure. I think, it goes back to, let's talk about the start of the pandemic, right? Like when that happened, everybody had to suddenly pivot from what they were comfortable with to going into this online setting. And what's interesting about that is when everybody shifted to that, I was already in that space with online instructional design. And
Yeah.
so, when we first started before the pandemic hit, we were about, science, technology, engineering, and math education. But when the pivot happened, we had to change with it. And suddenly, it wasn't just about educating people about how to teach in those spaces, like those face to face spaces. It's about how do we leverage these new spaces of online, right? And I think, what's been really interesting about studying how educators have adapted is, you know, seeing people realize that there's actually affordances and limitations in both places. And when we look at the research, the best environments are actually hybrid environments because then you can leverage both, right? And you can reach learners in different ways. So in some ways, a lot of the work that we've been doing is to help educators and also creative entrepreneurs understand the online space and take advantage of the affordances that the space can offer to people. So I hope that answered your question. I got distracted there, so I may not have.
Um, Yeah, and I appreciate that you're saying that there are benefits, right? There are some benefits to the online space, which is interesting because I think a lot
Mhm.
of the language we've had about it is negative, like, ah, it's so hard. And so, but there are positive things. And the other thing that I've enjoyed, because I come from an arts background, it is hearing from you how you are helping people who are providing arts programming to make that pivot. So what are the resources that you have available to help folks do that?
Oh, sure. So, we got into a partnership with the Iowa Department of Cultural Affairs. And I have to share the story because it's an interesting story.
Yeah.
I'm involved a lot in the STEM initiatives that are here in Iowa. And when that happened, I worked with the director for the Iowa Department of Cultural Affairs, Kris Kramer, and she kind of talked about how this pandemic has left a lot of creative entrepreneurs behind, right? Suddenly, we have moved from, teaching music classes in person, concerts, performances, to, this very small environment where we can no longer be face to face. We can no longer do these things in person. So, what do we do? And so I came in to work with her, to be able to create a training program that helps creatives bring their talents to the online space. Really helping them with, understanding what are the components of an online program. Like, one of the biggest misconceptions that people have is that they think, oh, yeah, okay, we're online. So I can just take everything that I do in person and then just do it on Zoom and everybody's going to be fine. And yeah, exactly. What we notice is that there's a lot of issues with that,
Yeah.
right? Like it's almost like translating what we do in, this physical space and having to think about, all right, how does that look? How does that translate to a digital environment? And because of that, one of the biggest things that people don't realize is that we lose the human physical presence.
Yeah.
Even though we're in Zoom, even though you see my face and stuff like that, it's not the same as when we're sitting in the same room, right? And I think everybody across the board can agree it's not the same. However, there are things that we need to do, pieces and components of instructional design, tricks, strategies that we can as educators put in place in that design space to help create that connection, because even though that's a disadvantage, right, we lose some of those things, there are big advantages. For example, one of the biggest advantages to being in an online space is the fact that you don't have to be geographically in one place, right?
Right.
Like, this podcast can reach everybody all over the world. And then the other thing is we no longer are restricted by time. So, like this podcast, maybe some of you may not be able to see it live, but you're probably seeing a recording of it.
Right.
That doesn't happen when we're in the physical space, right? So, if we're able to design and incorporate those, advantages to the online space, what you're creating then is not an adaptation of what you used to do physically, but more like an augmentation
Mhm.
of what you do physically.
Mhm.
And so that's what we work with. We work with a lot of creatives, we work with teachers on how do you understand and make sense of the digital space and how it fits in with what you're currently doing and what your teaching practices are.
Mhm. I love that because I think that's one of the things that's been missing for a lot of people is understanding how to take like that thing you want to create so much for your students
Mhm.
and just kind of like take it on and reimagine it in a totally different space. Like you're not going to be able to do it the way that you did before, but you're going to recreate and redesign for this online space.
Yep. And it's a different way of approaching it, right? Like I said, you can't just, think, oh, yeah, I'm going to just teach this on Zoom and it's going to work out great. There's different pieces that you need. Like, we talk about the kinds of scaffolds that are needed in order to bring that experience across. But the advantage is if you know those tricks and if you can incorporate those strategies, what you come away with is it actually a much more powerful experience than you normally would if it was just an in-person setting. And so a lot of the trainings that we do, like for instance, one of the things that we offer for individuals, and in fact, Jennifer Terry, who is also one of our business partners, when she looked at the program, she's like, almost anybody would be able to take advantage of this, because that course, we call it online instructional design, is that course is able to help everybody understand how you can take whatever it is, whatever project it is or passion it is, and translate it into a way that is interactive, engaging, and practical for other people to consume. And I think that's like the important piece that we're really looking for, right? Like, is how do we translate our digital experiences into something that can still engage and create relationship and
Yeah.
create that connection that we so crave and desire.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's such an important vehicle for learning, right? The relational stuff.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So how do people find out about this? Like, how do people connect with you and find out about how to take your course?
Yeah, there's actually two ways. Like I said, we have a Facebook group that is specific for teachers called Rebels Teaching Elementary STEAM. So if you are an elementary educator, or even, if you work with elementary students, I invite you to join that group, because we do like a Fierce at 5 on Thursdays, these live sessions where I kind of show these small techniques that you can use, you can use in person or online as well. Just little instructional strategies and tips that are based on learning theory. The other thing is you can go to www.keylearning.com. Key learning is spelled QI learning.com. And we have a whole list of the things, courses and things like that that you can sign up for. The other thing too is, Rochelle has my Calendly link. So, one of the extra treats about being on this podcast is if you're interested in meeting with me and doing a strategy session and talking about ways that we can support you, that is definitely something that you can take advantage of, because, I just love talking about instruction and learning. Like, this is my wheelhouse. And so, if there's ways that we can support you in that, that's what we like to do.
Awesome. Yes, and that is one of the reasons why I really wanted to feature you on the interview series, is that you have such a fabulous resource that I think relates to so many of the folks in the community that I reach. And so, yes, everyone, I will post some of these things below the video, so that you can get a hold of Yen, take advantage of a little free consultation with her, and check out the website. They've got some really great things going. Yeah, so thank you
Thanks.
for offering that, Yen. I'm curious for you, a lot of folks, as they've made this, pivot in this past year and dealt with this craziness of the pandemic, what have there been any gifts or silver linings for you as a person who wants to impact the field of education in powerful ways? What have been the silver linings for you?
I think one of the big ones is people are much more willing to connect and try new things. And that's been huge. Like, uh, you know, like I said at the beginning of this podcast, one of our missions is to really change the way we do education. And I think I speak for many people when we say, education, when they went through school, they probably learned despite school, not because of it, right? Or, a lot of us walked away with a lot of experiences that were very damaging. What if we were able to imagine education in a way that empowers all of our students, that inspires all of our students? Like, what if all of our students had the tools and could be inspired to do anything that they wanted to do when they graduated? Imagine what our society would look like if that were a possibility. That's kind of the thing that drives my thinking and my learning. But in order to be able to imagine that, in order to be able to create that sort of education environment, we have to let go of the limiting practices that we do that oppress students who are in that space, right? And one of those limiting pieces is about being familiar and used to the things that we're always doing.
Yeah.
Like, when we look at why is it our education system is still based on a model that is 50, 60 years old? One of the reasons why it persists is because people are so attached to the familiar,
Yeah.
right? And our expectations of education, our assessments of education are all based on the familiar. But unfortunately, the familiar is also what keeps our students behind. Because if
Mm.
you continue to do the same things, you're going to continue to get the same things, right?
Right.
And the advantage to, I shouldn't say the advantage to the pandemic. There's no advantage to the pandemic. But what I should say is because of the pandemic,
Yeah.
we are forced to get outside of our comfort zone,
Yeah.
whether or not we are given that
Like it
choice.
or
We're not,
not.
yeah, like it or not, here we are, right? Welcome to 2021, and we're still in the pandemic, and we're still having to teach in ways that are not familiar to us.
Yeah.
But one of the things that, has been a silver lining to that is that because of this disruption, there are now teachers who can see different ways of teaching that reach other students that they normally wouldn't have if they were still in the classroom doing their same old thing. That's been a huge advantage, right? It's allowed people to see anew what's possible. And it's forcing teachers to teach anew.
Yeah.
Good, bad, and ugly, it's still there, right? And that disruption is important if we take advantage of that, if we actually grow into that.
Yeah.
And that's what we try and do.
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree with that as well in the work that I do, where I do a lot of focus on social emotional learning and well-being of educators, students, and the school community, is really seeing how much suddenly things that we've been trying to push forward with SEL for a long time, suddenly everybody's like, oh snap, we can't go on without taking a look at these things, and
Yeah.
so that's been the sort of like hidden treasure in the whole thing for me too. So
Yeah.
do you have any, as people are reimagining education, you talked a little bit about looking at systems that oppress and different things like that. Do you have any words on like a vision or a recommendation of how do we move forward and look at, education through the pandemic and beyond? What are
I
your thoughts?
think I think there's a couple things that I would say to that. One of them is we have to let go of this assumption that we have to catch up. And it's interesting. I just finished an interview with Business Insider in Iowa where they asked, well, what do you predict for this coming year, right? Like for education. And
Yeah.
I said, the problem is you're going to have a tension between teachers who have now, tasted the possibility of what education can be and the amazing opportunities that are out there for it versus, a majority of folks who just want to go back to what it was, right? There's going to be that tension. And there's going to be the tension that we want to go back to what it was because people are left behind. And that assumption is the piece that we have to really challenge and dismantle. Because here's the thing, the question is behind what? You can't make the pandemic just like this an excuse and it's going to go away and we're behind and now we have to catch up. This interruption is not an excuse to go back to where we were. Instead, this interruption should be viewed as a portal for us to leave behind what wasn't working for us anymore so that we can embrace the things that will help us move ahead. That's the way I see it, right? And so, one of the things that I suggest as educators is we have to hold ourselves to that standard of moving ahead rather than going back to what we believed was normal. There's no more normal, and there shouldn't be.
Right.
Normal did not serve us.
Right.
Right? And so this is the space where we need to be able to hold in our heads the vision of what should be,
Yeah.
what can be.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love that you brought all of that up because I feel like, the whole purpose of education is to prepare young people to live life, right? Right?
Right?
And to be
Yeah.
able to make it through the challenges of a life successfully and to adapt to what's going on and to be mentally well and to still stay true to a purpose or have something to offer. And so when we get stuck on like, well, they're getting behind, it's like, no, but how are we teaching them how to move through a time like this? Because this,
Yes.
right? Because this pandemic is this could be the first of many.
Yeah.
Right? Like we are heading
Yep.
into a time where this kind of like biological upset because of the way that we're moving into, different territories around the world or whatever, and population is exploding and all this kind of stuff could be going on. So how are we laying the groundwork for young people growing up right now to be able to adapt to circumstances, to have good mental health, to have healthy relationships,
Yes.
to stay true to their purpose and develop their curiosity and their intelligence and their skills in all kinds of ways. How are
Right.
we doing that? So
Right. And
I'm glad
I
you brought
mean,
that
yeah,
up.
because if we think about it, right, like one of the biggest problems with education before the pandemic was what, Bell Hooks talks about this. I love her. She's this great, amazing theorist that talks about transformative education. And she talks about the fact that traditional education is about the disconnection between the head and the heart and soul, right? Like it's all about the academics, what we know, what we memorize, and what we parrot back, right? The disconnection is that it doesn't matter who you are, how you feel, right? And what you believe or what you're doing. There's the disconnection. So she talks about it as almost like a beheading where we only it's a classroom with just heads
Yeah,
and empty heads where we have to pour things in, right? But what happened with the pandemic is that it forces us now to recognize the rest, the
yeah,
whole person,
yeah,
right? Like what you're talking about is, we have to recognize the mental health, the wellness, right? The whole body, which is actually how learning should be, anyways. I find it's crazy when we look at learning theories of the past that it's only about like knowledge and frameworks and cognition and all of those things. But yet, learning, so much of learning is cultural and emotional.
mhm,
Like I could be the best straight A student, and yet on my crappy days, I don't care what it is, I'm not going to learn it. I don't feel like I'm going to, you know what I mean? I don't
yeah,
feel like learning today.
yeah,
And that should be recognized. That should be acknowledged as a whole person. With the pandemic, one of the things that happened is when students had to go online, we realized how much they have not learned how to be self-directed learners, right? Self-directed learning is an emotional state. It's also a state of independence and empowerment
yeah, yeah.
and
Agency, right? Yeah,
agency.
yeah,
And so much of in-person learning has been about taking that all away.
right.
So now with the pandemic, with having to be in these online spaces and with moving forward, we have to look at how do we build in self-directed learning, agency,
Yeah.
emotion,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Independence in our students in addition to this,
Yeah.
because this is not enough. And we've also learned, I mean, what was the first thing that happened when we all moved online in the spring of 2020? We got rid of the standards. All of a sudden they weren't important. And you know why? Because they aren't. Standardized testing was not important then,
Right. Right.
right? It's
Yeah.
not the most important thing in education. What was the most important thing in education? Health and well-being, getting kids fed, getting them the connection and the emotional support that was needed. And what we have to remember as educators, even as we move through the pandemic and beyond, we should not forget those lessons,
Yeah.
you know, and the pandemic should not be a forgotten event. It should be an event that we grew into.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and that was a catalyst for us to become a more, right? And to evolve. Yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
evolve and not devolve, right? Our education also evolved. There's ugly, very ugly parts of it. But the thing is, we as educators need to separate ourselves from the rhetoric of politicians going, we have to go back to school. We have to bring it back to where it was. We are the witnesses
Yeah.
that see beyond that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You spent the time in the classroom. You know there
Yeah.
is more to it than that.
Yeah.
And if we face this again, are our students prepared?
Right.
That's the big question, right? That
Right.
we have to, as educators, speak to.
Yeah. 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 Woo!
Sorry. It's just been a lot on my mind about that, right? Because my
Yeah.
big worry is that we go back because everybody thinks that's where we're supposed to be. And we have to step into our own knowledge of teaching, our own knowledge of leadership to say no. No, we don't, because that won't help us if this happens again.
Yeah.
That won't help us, in the 21st century when we still have to live in this age of computers and you think we need to go back. We don't. We need to figure out how computers, how technology, how these things enhance what we
Right.
already have.
Right. Right. Well, and it also drives home a lot of what I am pushing forward with the work that I do with my consulting business, which is like we need to systematize these spaces where educators can learn together, where they can
Yes.
share their learning together, where they can learn these wellness practices and all that stuff together and really reimagine things and move forward from a unified collective community space as educators, because the question behind all of it is like, do we know how to do it? How do we take
Yes.
kids somewhere we don't know how to be or how to do? And so, how do we get even further behind all of it and start where our educators are really supported and have those skills and tools and experiences that they can teach from?
Yeah.
So, and that's why I'm excited about working with you, because we've got all these like complementary pieces going, coming together to really serve educators in this time and beyond. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
I have a couple of just like rapid fire, fun little questions I want to throw at you while we end. How
Okay.
does that sound? Like,
All right. I'll try my best.
oh,
Tell me
these
if I
are just
talk
like
too much.
these will just be like short answer, like really quick. I know one of the big
Okay.
things, one of the hot topics, right? And that we have also done some workshops around and stuff is about self-care. What
Yep.
is your personal favorite, like pick me up or go to when you've had a rough day?
Oh, wow. Pick me up, go to. Gosh, there's so many things when I've had a rough day. You know what I do? Here's my instant one. I
Hmm.
have a thing of pencils next to me and I throw them. I actually sit in the moment. I get really angry and I take it out on my pencils. I just throw them all over the place. I have my own temper tantrum, and it really helps actually. Like one thing, this is one of the things like the pandemic has really taught me too, is you know what? There's times we're still grieving, right? We're grieving as a nation of
Yeah.
what was,
Yeah.
and of the people that we've lost. And it used to be years ago when I would be like, okay, just shut it up and keep going, right? But
Yeah.
now I'm like, no, I can't do that because what happens is that festers.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, like being able to be in the moment, being able to experience that, those rough days, yeah, I have them,
Yeah.
and then like giving attention to that,
Yeah.
throwing pencils, having that temper tantrum. God, it feels so good when I'm done,
Yeah.
so
Have a little like release valve where you can like like let it out,
yeah.
let it go. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. They're not sharpened pencils. We don't want anybody to get hurt.
Just clarify that we're not thinking
Yeah, they're not harpoons. Although, I'm sure if people wanted to do that and they had a little target or something, that is your discretion of what
Yeah.
makes you feel better on that. But yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned bell hooks, but I'm curious if
Yeah.
there is any other current thought leader, author, speaker who inspires you.
Wow. There are so many. Yeah, I'm
Top
a
of mind.
theorist. I'm a theorist. One of the things, and I'm sorry if my brain's got so many things, so names do not come to mind
Mm-mm.
as much, and they should. Uh, the inspirational poet that was at Biden's inauguration. I
Mm.
think I will say I've been taking moments to dissect her poetry,
Mhm,
and really thoughtfully pull that apart.
mhm,
It's been her writing just really spoke to me, but also not only did it speak to me in those ways, her words were instrumental in me trying to see how other people, like Trump supporters,
mhm,
um, also viewed that, right? Like it's just been interesting. I'll give you an example. My Facebook page has both people from the left and right,
mhm,
people from the far left and people from the far right. I tend to track in the middle.
mhm.
And so it's been interesting, like taking a piece of poetry like that, where people have finally had voice and to speak and to say, okay, how does that get interpreted? Like, this is my interpretation. This is how it speaks to me. But how would these other people speak to that? Right.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So that's been some of the work that I've been doing.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And then let's just do one more.
Okay.
Is there someone whose work that you really admire that you'd like to shout out and that you also think I should also be talking to on the Artful Leaders interview series?
Yes, and actually you are. So I talked about Kris Kramer,
Mm-hmm.
whom you absolutely should work with. So like I said, she is the head of the Iowa Cultural Department of Cultural Affairs. And I when I started working with her, I had no idea
Mm-hmm.
how much she has on her plate.
Mm-hmm.
She really is, she kind of is like the nucleus
Mm-hmm.
for many of the Iowa arts culture things that are happening in the state. And I have to say, I'm the rookie. So when we work with, a lot of, she and I sit on the Iowa STEM Council STEM to STEAM working group committee. And our work is about how do we bring arts and humanities into the STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math fields, right? And it's just amazing how she has taught me. She's very much my mentor who has taught me about understanding multiple perspectives, understanding how our words can be interpreted in these different ways, and how do we say things to bring people to the table, to listen and to compromise, right? And she's great about that. She's just so knowledgeable about how you can bring, I mean, I tell you, when we created this working group, Kris was really good about bringing on people from just multiple different perspectives, right? And you would think when you do that, it's very difficult to listen to those voices and come up with compromise. But, thanks to her guidance and her mentoring, she was able to do that. That's the beauty behind a lot of what she does. And I try to emulate that. And she's actually the reason why we created the online instructional design piece, because she's like, well, how do we help our creative entrepreneurs, our, educators in the arts? How do we help bring them on board
Yeah.
to this technology? How do we help them survive the pandemic? How do we give them the tools to not only survive the pandemic, but beyond? And so, that partnership has been really valuable. So I don't know if you have a date set for her.
Not yet.
Yeah, but you definitely need to, and pick her brain on those things, because I think one of the things that I didn't realize until my advisory board actually pushed me into this, when I became an entrepreneur, I didn't realize how much my state invests in entrepreneurship
Mm.
until I had people that pointed me to those things. And here's the thing that we don't think about, right? As entrepreneurs, when we first start these businesses, it's always about in our head. It's always about us thinking about, okay, who are our students? Who are our clients? How do I make money fast? Right? These are the things that we talk about. However, we are a part of a much larger ecosystem that wants us to succeed.
Mhm.
And the reason why they want us to succeed is because this nation is built on entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Like, think about Apple, right? And the fact that, Bill Gates and all of these people started as entrepreneurs. And when they grow, and everybody hopefully grows with them, right? And so, just one thing to bring up is there's a lot of resources out there for us. But the thing is, if we don't spend the time looking for the resources that are in our state, we don't know about them.
Mhm.
But they're incredibly helpful for supporting us. Educators, too. There's tons of foundations to go to, there's tons of even businesses. So many businesses that want to help because they know that the pandemic has put education in a crisis, but they may not know what to do about it.
Yeah.
And yours, and I'm speaking to you, yes, you who is listening into this podcast, your cause is an important and a worthy one that is worthy of funding. But it's a matter of bringing that word out and asking people for that help.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, I
Yeah.
appreciate that you just made that little pitch for entrepreneurs at the end, because so many of the educators that I have been talking to this year, who especially have like really creative background or have some like really unique approach that they've developed, I've been like, you know, there's this thing called starting your own business, and
Yeah.
all the ways that we can impact this field meaningfully, sort of outside of the traditional organizations or school systems, right? And
Yes.
we can create things outside and then pull things forward, through a different way of working.
Yes. And I think even with educators, like if you have a big project that you want to do, if you have a club or an organization or something big, right? Like there's places to go. Let me back up. You don't need to ask for permission. What you have to do is go out and find supporters.
Yeah.
And there will be supporters following you, I guarantee you. But what you have to do is be brave enough to go out and ask for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Awesome. Well, I think that's a fabulous way to wrap up this conversation with our rebel educator, Jen Verhoeven.
thank you.
Thank you so much. I have a meeting with a charter school that starts in 3
Yay.
minutes. So I'm gonna
Yes.
go ahead and wrap this up. But I always feel like we could talk forever because there's just so much cool stuff we could chat about. But thank you so much for being on with us today. We'll get all those links to your calendar and your website and all that so folks can connect with you about all those great online teaching resources that you have. And I will see you.
Thanks, Rochelle.
Ooh.
Yes. I'll see you soon. Bye, everybody. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Yen.
Of course. Thank you, Rochelle. Let me know if there's anything else that you need, okay?
Yeah, I will.
Yeah, and yes, we'll touch base. I'll send an email out to the sisterhood and let's see if we can schedule like just a time to, you know.
Put our
Yeah,
heads together and share and all that good stuff. Good, good.
sounds good to me. All right, take care.
Awesome.
Have a good day.
Thank
Good luck
you.
with your charter school meeting.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.